Hey YouTubers, Mike Martins here. Mike Martins channel with another beautiful edition of Housing Crisis. It's nuts. I don't know how nuts. This is beyond nuts. This is like nuts is actually tasty, like peanuts. This is like beyond capacity of some sort of way to fathom, to explain to people what the hell is going on, because it's beyond human control anymore. I think we need some sort of foreign intervention to come down to fix this problem, because obviously we can't as human beings. Canada's 1.1 trillion shadow banking sector is now half as large as the banks. So what are the banks banking on? Enough about China. Let's talk about us. Turns out Canadians' thirst for credit far exceeds what our traditional banks can offer. This has resulted in a massive shadow banking sector that's more than half the size of our traditional banking sector. While it's being monitored by Bank of Canada, BOC, there's not a lot they can or want to do. Shadow banking has transformed into a modern part of finance, even though it amplifies economic shock factors. It screws up the inflation. It screws up everything. Now, here's the problem, people. Some criminal entity launders $2 million and buys a house for $2 million. The guy doesn't care if the house is worth $100,000, but he's paying $2 million. Then he flips it to his friend. Then his friend buys the house. Oh, I'll give you 2.1 for that. Pays it through a shadow entity. Buddy's money's clean in North America. Now he's got 2.1 million to play with, because now it's clear. Because he sold the house, the money got transferred into a Canadian bank account. Boom, money's clear. The next guy comes in and says, I'll give you 2.3 million for that. And then the guy that sold it makes that clear money, and then it just keeps shadow flipping as it goes. And then the Canadian proper can't afford to buy, right? It's not like that there's, that the Canadian proper isn't rich to buy these homes. A lot of the Canadian proper some of the Canadian proper isn't dumb to spend $3 million on a house that's worth 280 grand, 400 maybe. Being generous here, 400. Anyways, shadow banking in Canada. Shadow banking system is a financial intermediate, aka middlemen, that help ensure that demand for credit is fulfilled. They're kind of like banks without that whole regulatory oversight, according to BOC, Bank of Canada. Canadian shadow bankers primarily engage in certain types of investment funds and repurchase agreements, mortgages, and consumer finance, private label, securitization, and investment deals not owned by traditional banks, covering that much ground. It's not surprising that they often have strong relationship with large banks. Despite the close relationship, shadow banks and regular banks aren't really bros, BOC explained in their annual report that they have the potential to increase financial sector vulnerabilities. Since the sector is not prudentially regulated, when things started to go sideways during the Great Recession, remember 2008, significant amount of blame was placed on U.S. shadow bankers. More than half the size of regular banking industry. While BLC researchers cautioned that there are significant gaps in data knowledge, what they could find was massive. They estimated that the industry has liabilities of $1.1 trillion. Just a little more than half of the 2.1 trillion in liabilities Canadian banks have. It's also going to get a lot bigger soon. As BLC researchers noted, further regulation of traditional banks will lead to migration of activity from traditional banking sectors to the shadow. Yeah, you got the guy underwriting the deal. TDS. Okay, you know what? TDS doesn't fit. Let's move the TDS to 70%. Even though TDS has got to be at 45%. Underwriter will pass the head underwriter will pass a law down the bank saying down the tube, we're going to start approving TDSs at 75%. Who cares if the guy is negative from his paycheck after he pays his mortgage? That's how bad it's going to get. China gets a lot of heat in shadow banking sector, but Canada's number one, almost 5 times larger per capita, with cooling measures on the horizon for Canada. That number is about to get a hell of a lot larger. I like how they put that there. And it says right here, it just says what it says there. As big as number of for shadow banks, it's actually a little low due to the way BOC compiled their estimates. Mortgage finance companies, MFCs, mortgage lenders that underwrite service 12% residential mortgages, 165 billion of 2015, only accounting for 10 billion of the estimate. Since MFCs sell the mortgages to third parties such as banks or fund them with government-backed securitizations, only the amount being warehoused prior to the sale securitization was included to estimate, so there's little need to worry about the loans since they are now regulated banks and the government is responsible for them. Cool. No, because the taxpayer and the working poor has to bail this crap out when it crashes. Do you understand? So what they're doing is like Fannie Mae and Bernie Mac and all those guys when they had those mortgage-backed securities and then sold them on the markets and stuff like that. Bad or good, doesn't even matter. They just put it out there and securitized it and sealed it and signed it, and it was good to go. And this is, it's really bad. Risk of shadow banks. Sure, shadow banks keep banks competitive and provide forms of finance. Innovation regulated banks don't have the freedom to do, but there's also risk. While the BOC maintains that there were not an intimate risk, they also go on to say that there is one thing we should watch out for. Remember the whole sticky housing situation in the United States that caused the Great Recession? Well, it's pretty well researched now that the Federal Reserve Board published a few of their findings. While the report is dry if you're not a finance nerd, the takeaway in the shadow banking is fine when it works, and is even good thing sometimes. However, they amplify external negative shocks, like I don't know, like a housing correction. They also found that during the recession, sustainable shadow banks can cause slower recoveries and vulnerable to runs. A bank run, a bankster, for markets decline and people scramble to withdraw their money. The result, this results in, sorry guys, I'm reading through the screen. It's really hard on my eyes. The lenders liquidate assets in a fair sale, which reduces assets prices further. This perfect storm happens with very little warning. That's what happens to stocks too when they start liquidating. Canada's shocking dependence on shadow banking brings up some interesting question. Are traditional lending rules too tough for the average family? Have Canadians become so greedy they need loans in excess of typical qualifications? Or have stagnated wages forced Canadians to borrow the difference to make a living? Leave your comments below. So it's a really good article. I'll leave a link. But like I was saying, guys, very important that a lot of the banks will start going towards the shadow. We saw what happened with one of the major banks in Canada. I'm not going to say their name, but they're the Emerald Bank and the Green Bank, or whatever you want to call them, weren't properly underwriting deals. They weren't clarifying what was what in the deal, and a lot of people did not qualify for these loans, but they changed the TDS a bit, sent it up to the underwriter. Underwriter would return it to client saying, hey, it's missing this, I need another T4. And a lot of times it's happened where they make fake T4s, or they make up income so the TDS would fit. TDS is the lender's nightmare. If they can't get the TDS to fit, they can't make the loan work, the total debt service ratio. This is beyond. This is like, I'm actually like flabbergasted. I'm just, no one's, it's almost like a sense of tyranny where the banks could do it. But if we did something like this and started shadow banking and like actually creating this from scratch and lending out our money and doing this kind of stuff, we'd go to jail. This is, oh. I'll leave a link below. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching. Bye.